Welcome, brave listener. Tonight we venture into shadows, where every whisper hides a shriek. Listen closely. The creak beneath the floorboards might be your first warning. These tales cling like cobwebs, lingering long after the final breath. We're honored to host your dread. Settle in. The dark has teeth. Story 1. It was weird. One day I was an only child. The next I had an older brother. My parents didn't even warn me. Just one day, he arrived and took my room. And I had to sleep in the basement. He arrived in a large waxed raincoat. I remember the water droplets that hung to its surface as he leaned over me and offered his hand. I ran behind my mother's legs and stayed there. He smiled back. My mother apologized for me. And that it was obvious after a few days that he was their favorite. I had a lot of issues, and I knew I was a disappointment to them. I visited a therapist twice a week, though I didn't talk much. I never did. I think that was my main problem. I was fine. My parents thought otherwise one day. My new brother came downstairs and handed me a used painting set and canvases. I ignored him, upset he'd usurped me. He didn't say anything. Instead, set up the easel and began to paint. He was incredible. I watched in awe as within minutes he had painted things I couldn't imagine were possible from a paintbrush. He finished with a painting of a door. It looked familiar, but I wasn't sure. He set down the paints and walked back upstairs. I stared at it for weeks. Then one day, I decided to try for myself. At first I was terrible, but as the months rolled on I got better and better. I still didn't have the confidence to speak to my brother. But every now and then, he'd make his way into the basement and look at what I'd painted. He'd stare at them with nostalgia in his eyes. He would cry. I, though, hid behind the sofa, watching him mentally critique my work. Keep it up, he said in a hushed tone. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I felt a warm glow around me, something I'd not felt before. So I continued to paint. By the time I was a teenager, my brother was around less and less, but my painting was as good as what his was when he first showed me. I really wanted him to see what I'd created. It was all because of him. After all, I waited one day in the living room. I stole glances out of the window, waiting for him to come home. When he did, I jumped out of my chair and ran to the door to greet him. He stepped back, as if not wanting to embrace me. Look at what I painted, I said to him. My parents appeared surprised, even though I was 16. I rarely spoke. I ran to the basement door. I think you should follow him, my mother said to my brother. I waited for what seemed like hours, until my brother walked down the stairs. I could barely see his face under the hood of his waxed jacket. "What do you think?" I offered. He stepped into the light, examining the painting. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I put my hand to my mouth. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. And he began to cry upset. I raced over to him and hugged him. "Thank you for teaching me," I said. I then felt his body sway. I tried to hold on to him, but my grasp wasn't strong enough. He collapsed, hitting his head on the side of my desk and onto the floor. Beep. The following months were the worst of my life. My brother was dead. With my mental history, I was sent to a psychiatric hospital. They said I had an episode and tried to beep my brother. I didn't. I swear. He fell. They said it may have been a side effect of the medication I was on, or my psychosis. In general, after many sessions with the in-house psychiatrist, I was allowed access to painting material. To be honest, it wasn't that bad. I saw my parents once a week, and I was able to paint. I thought about my brother a lot. I thought about that painting he did for me, the one of the door. I tried my best to remember it, and over I tried to paint it. Each time I stood back and looked at it. Something wasn't right, and I never knew what, until one day I got it spot on. That's when I realized what it was of. It was the front door of our house. Seeing it in front of me, it was so obvious. I peered at it from different angles. I remembered it all. I started to paint in all the little details. The room began to get cold, so I put on my jacket. I placed the paints in my pocket when I was done, and gazed in awe. It was almost real. I stared and cried. I wasn't going to see this front door for a long time, if ever. That frightened me. The longer I gazed, the more I wished I could just be standing outside it, knocking on it, waiting for my parents to answer. I pretended I was standing outside. For the first time in months, I felt free. I imagined the wind blowing as the rains fell. I imagined reaching out to turn the handle. I closed my eyes and reached. I could feel the rain on my forehead. I could feel the cool air. I could hear the water slap against my jacket. I opened my eyes. I was there, outside my parents' house. I panicked briefly before, almost on autopilot, walking towards the door. I knocked. I felt I must be dreaming. Then the door opened. My mother stood there. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mom, it's your Sanj." Tried to close the door. I placed my foot in the way. "Please, just listen to me." She looked into my eyes. There was a recognition in them. She knew I was truthful. "Come on in," she said. Confused, I saw a little boy in the living room. I knelt down to talk to him. He ran behind his mother's legs. I smiled, remembering myself doing that, I tapped my pocket. Feeling the painting set in there, I knew what I needed to do, Beep. Story 2. I've been involved with water search and rescue for 12 years now. I've seen a lot of upsetting and even unexplainable things in my time. But those pale in comparison to what I saw recently. Water search and rescue is often a depressing job. When someone gets lost in a forest, they can still be found alive days later. But when we get a call, it's almost always body recovery. People don't last long in the water. I can't tell you exactly where. But I live in a northern territory known for its water sports, fishing, kayaking, diving, whatever it is. Our waters probably have a solid reputation for it. Despite that, this area isn't some kind of resort. The waters here are cold and oftentimes vicious. Search and rescue operations here can be grueling, and not many stick with it. There are a few older guys who have been doing it longer than me. But I am one of the most experienced around, like I said before. This job is more body recovery than anything, especially here. We save more live moose from the water than live humans. And when we get a call about a missing child, well, we'd be better off just giving our condolences. That is just how the waters are here. Our small town has one of the highest drowning rates in the country, but we look anyway, and usually we find a body. I've considered quitting many times in my career. Most people quit after their first recovery. In training, we try to emphasize just how much water can distort a corpse. But nothing can prepare you for the harsh reality. It's not uncommon for us to find bodies bloated beyond recognition. Sometimes they barely even seem human. A lot of divers don't last long after seeing something like that. But I continued to do it after all these years. I figured if I didn't, then no one would, however. The things I saw last week have made me reconsider that decision. I got the call around 11 a.m. A father had taken his 10-year-old son fly fishing. At one point, the father managed to stab a hook all the way through his finger. He went back up to his truck to get a first aid kit. The boy was gone when he returned a few minutes later. When I first heard the story, I hung my head in silence for a moment. It had been raining heavily for almost a month now, and the waters were running faster than ever. To make things worse, it was unusually cold for the season. A number of people had gone missing in recent weeks. Many of them had yet to be found. I had little hope of finding the boy alive. Me and a couple of other divers were at the site where the boy went missing within an hour, and a larger search and rescue team located a few towns over was headed our way. We talked with the father and even searched the forest for a bit, hoping that he had just wandered off. But eventually we realized that we would have to begin searching in the river the moment I got in the water. I knew the boy was gone. The current was worse than it had ever been, and even I had difficulty navigating the icy river. We looked for hours in the surrounding areas, and even expanded our search once the larger team had arrived. The boy was nowhere to be found. I was surprised. I hadn't expected to find him alive, but I had at least anticipated finding a body. However, there was no trace of him. The sun got low, and the air grew colder. We were considering calling it off as nightfall approached, and resuming the search the next day, when I discovered something there. A lot of creek beds around the river. Many of them have dried up as a result of encroaching vegetation or man-made efforts to divert the water. We usually don't pay any attention to them. However, with all of the recent rain, I noticed that one of the larger creek beds had begun flowing again. A surprising amount of water crashed through it, easily enough to carry a young boy. The creek ran directly across a bend in the river, connecting it at 2 points. I followed it and realized that the boy could be located outside of our initial search area. As I approached where the creek reconnected with the main river, I felt a sinking feeling in my gut. There's a place in the river where not even search and rescue divers are supposed to go. It is known as Badwater. This area lies on one half of the river and runs for about 100 yards. It is near a densely vegetated area, so we don't often have to worry about people swimming there. But a lot of disappearances occur in the surrounding waters. Despite that, I've been warned not to dive there since I began doing search and rescue. Supposedly, the undercurrent is so strong that even the most experienced swimmer would be swept away in an instant. Don't go near Badwater. It was a mantra of the older divers. The creek ended exactly in the center of the Badwater region. As I reached it, I stopped and chewed my lip thoughtfully. If I went back and reported this to the other divers, they would tell me to let it go. They wouldn't let me dive there. But deep down I felt like the boy's body must be tangled up in some weeds nearby. If only I could find it. I hated the idea of that kid being stuck down there, slowly bloating and rotting away, while his parents sat at home wondering where their boy had gone. Badwater didn't seem to be that bad. I'd seen rougher waters before, but I knew looks could be deceiving. Just below the surface, it could be flowing faster than I ever imagined, and I'd be swept away in an instant. Besides, I wasn't supposed to dive alone. I almost turned back, but something made me stay. I stared into the river for a moment, thinking about the boy. Then I put on my gear and dropped into the icy waters. The first thing I noticed was that the current actually seemed pretty weak. As a matter of fact, it was weaker than the rest of the river. The water was extremely deep there, and I could see only blackness below as I dove. I kicked deeper and deeper, thinking that the current might pick up lower down. But the opposite seemed to be true. The water was almost completely still. I went even deeper, until finally green shapes began to materialize in front of me. I thought I'd finally reached a bed of weeds, but as I kicked lower, the truth came into full view. I felt Beep come up at the sight, an odd and dangerous sensation when you re-wearing a scuba mask, countless arms stuck up from the ground below. I thought I had come upon a trove of bodies, but the disgusting reality became even more apparent only a moment later. The arms grew directly into the ground. They even had roots that spread out from the base. It was as if someone had cut off hundreds of arms at the shoulder and planted them there. They were green, and I watched as they clutched at the water around them. They varied in size and seemingly age. Grotesque baby hands sprouted near the bottom, and they opened and closed their fists hungrily. It was then that I saw the boy. His eyes stared sightlessly ahead as those grotesque arms pulled his dead body downward. It seemed they had just gotten a hold of him. The arms yanked at him, burying him in the surrounding sediment. They pushed and writhed and squirmed until he was securely buried up to the chest. I stared in mesmerized horror. That was when the other bodies came into focus. There must have been at least 4 more, all in varying stages of decay. Some were bloated beyond recognition, only bulky white masses that protruded loosely from the riverbed. I once again felt Beep rising in my throat and swallowed it back down. The Beep hands were feeding off the bodies, using them as fertilizer. The moment I clambered out of the water, I tore my mask off and retched. I couldn't stop thinking about those disgusting bodies, those grasping hands. They were like some sort of carnivorous plant, yet they were so humanoid. I vomited again at the thought. I frantically ran back to our base camp and pulled one of the other divers aside. Moose was the most experienced person on our team. He'd been diving for over 20 years ever since moving here. I told him about what I saw. When I finished, he stared at me in cold silence. I told you never to go near bad water. His voice contained an iciness that even his thick Louisiana accent couldn't conceal. That's what you concerned about. I was incredulous. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed tightly. Don T tell anyone else about this. If the others find out you went into bad water." He trailed off and thought for a moment. "Well, it won be good." He shook his head like a disappointed father. "But what about those things?" I tried to keep my voice down, hoping no one would hear us. "How many people have died because of those beep things?" "Shut up," Moose said. "We have an agreement. There's a reason they only grow in bad water." Don T beeped this up. I started to say something, but the words caught in my throat. He was keeping something from me, he sighed. And I saw something like sadness behind his eyes. Sometimes you have to decide between lesser and greater evils. Even the best possible decisions can still keep you up at night. He went silent for a moment and only stared at me. "Don T, tell anyone about this. Maybe one day you'll understand." He walked away after that and called off the day's search, despite what ID told him. We continued to search for the next 2 days. By the 3rd day, we called it off completely and gave our condolences to the family. Don T know what the beep is happening. Moose has been acting different towards me ever since. There's an iciness to him. But every now and then, beep shoot me a knowing glance, like we were in on some secret together. IV noticed the other older divers acting strangely too. What did he mean by agreement? What the beep were those arm things? I am considering quitting and moving away from here. I can't live with the knowledge that those things are down there, slowly feeding off the body of a young boy, among countless others. Part 2. Story 3. The walls began sweating on the 3rd day. Mara pressed her palm against the floral wallpaper her grandmother had hung half a century ago, feeling the clammy moisture beading beneath her fingertips. The old lake house smelled different now, not of lemon polish and cedar chests, but of wet soil and something metallic clinging to the back of her throat. She told herself it was the storm. 3 straight days of November rain, pounding the tin roof. The lake rising to lick at the porch steps. Perfect conditions for mold to bloom in secret corners. "See," she said aloud, voice swallowed by the house's peculiar acoustics. Science her reflection in the speckled bathroom mirror nodded agreement. Dark crescents bruised her lower eyelids, same as they had every morning since the accident. She turned the tap. Brown water coughed into the porcelain sink. The first photograph appeared that afternoon. Mara found it face down on the braided rug by the wood stove. Edges curled from humidity. A black and white snapshot of a little girl standing knee-deep in lake water. Sun flare obscuring her face. She turned it over. No date. No inscription. Just that pale smudge of a child. One hand raised as if waving. Must have fallen out of an old album, she told the empty house her grandmother had taken hundreds of photos during those long-ago summers. The logical explanation settled like a stone in her stomach that night. The scratching began. Not mice, not branches against window panes. This was the precise cadence of fingernails dragging across floorboards, hesitant at first, then growing bolder as midnight approached. Mara followed the sound through darkened rooms, flashlight beam trembling across walls, hung with decades of family portraits. Her dead mother smiled from a silver frame, eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. Who's there? The words tasted of pennies. The scratching stopped when she woke on the fourth morning. 7 more photographs lay scattered across the kitchen table. All children, all faceless, all standing in the lake. Her hands shook as she dialed the landline. Paul. Something's wrong static hissed through the receiver. Her husband's voice emerged in fragments. Storm took out. Cell tower, 2 days. Hold on the line went dead. Mara stared at the rotary phone. Its coiled cord, suddenly reminiscent of intestine. She methodically checked every window lock, then the doors, then the locks again by twilight. The photographs had migrated to her bedroom dresser. They formed a perfect fan across the scarred oak surface, edges overlapping like scales. Mara didn't remember moving them, didn't remember developing the new ones, either the fresh prints, still damp, reeking of darkroom chemicals. These showed the house, her house, with shadowy figures pressed against the windows. From the inside the rain intensified. Mara dragged Grandma's wingback chair against the front door and sat clutching a fire poker, watching water cascade down the windows in rippling curtains. The lake was in the house now. She felt it in the spongy floorboards, tasted it in the phlegm rattling in her chest. When the power went out, she didn't bother with candles. Better to watch the darkness head on something splashed in the hallway. Paul. The lie curdled on her tongue. Paul was 40 miles away in their split-level suburban, probably pouring himself a third whiskey, while CNN murmured about the historic storm. He hadn't believed her about the accident either. Brakes fail all the time, Mar. Not your fault. The splashing drew closer. Mara's grip on the poker, tightened as a shape, emerged in the doorway, small and dripping. Water pooling around bare feet. The flashlight slipped from her lap. The beam rolled across floorboards, illuminating a pale ankle, the hem of a soaked sundress. No. Mara pressed back into the chair. You're not here. The girl took a shuffling step forward. Dark water streamed from her hair, from her empty eye sockets, from the gaping hole in her chest where the steering column had punched through. Mommy. The The voice bubbled like a drowning victim's. "You left me in the lake," Mara screamed. The flashlight struck the wall, plunging the room into darkness. Cold little fingers closed around her wrist. When she woke at dawn, she was lying in 3 inches of lake water. Photographs floated around her like lily pads. Mara scrambled backward, heels slipping on wet floorboards. Her elbow struck something metallic. The antique box camera Grandma kept on the sideboard, a hulking thing with accordion bellows that hadn't functioned in decades. It pointed at her. Fresh film peeked from the development slot. Mara's breath hitched. She approached as one might a coiled snake. The viewfinder showed her own face, warped and fish-eyed. Her finger brushed the shutter release. Click-whir, the camera spat out a square print. Mara watched in horror as an image developed, not the sunlit kitchen, but the house at midnight. A woman stood at the bedroom window, hands pressed against glass. Behind her loomed a dark mass of tendrils, pouring from the walls like ink. The floorboards creaked. Mara spun to find the hallway dry, the wingback chair back in its proper place. No water, no photographs, no footprints but her own. She spent the 5th day tearing through cardboard boxes in the attic. Dust motes swirled in slanted light from the round window as she unearthed Grandma's journal's crisp pages filled with looping script. The entries started cheerful enough. June 12, 1963. Billy caught a bass big as his leg, but darkened as summer progressed. July 29. Told Sheriff about the night figures. He asked what Paul's been mixing in my lemonade. The final entry stopped mid-sentence. Whatever's in the lake, it's learned how to thunder, rattled the house. Mara jumped, sending journals sliding across the floor. A Polaroid fluttered out from between pages. Grandma and 2 children at the lake's edge. Except where their faces should have been, the film showed only dark smudges. The camera. She needed to click-whir. The sound came from downstairs. Mara froze. Another mechanical click. Another whir. She crept down the attic ladder, ears straining. The noises led her to the boarded-up root cellar she'd sworn to Paul was just an old pantry. The padlock lay rusted open. Stone steps descended into blackness. Mara's flashlight illuminated concrete walls, weeping with algae. The smell here was unbearable rotting meat and swamp gas. At the bottom, Grandma's box camera sat mounted on a tripod, pointed at a rusted metal chair. Click-whir, a fresh photograph slid into the development tray. This one showed the chair occupied. The developing chemicals brought up details in stages. Small bare feet dangling above the floor, water-darkened hair. A sundress fused to a chest cavity, full of lakeweed and car parts. Mommy, Mara whirled. The girl stood at the base of the stairs, water cascading from her ruined body. Behind her, the concrete walls bulged inward, black tendrils emerging like roots, seeking light. You promised to stay. The thing wearing her daughter's face smiled with a mouth full of screws. Now we'll always be together. Mara woke in the chair. Cold metal bit into her wrists and ankles. The camera stared, unblinking. Across the cellar, the root cellar stairs had vanished, replaced by smooth concrete. Water lapped at her toes. The walls pulsed. Clickwhir, somewhere above, a phone rang. Paul's voice echoed down through pipes. Mar, you there? Road crews say I can get through tomorrow. Just hang on. Okay. The tendrils caressed her cheeks. The camera clicked. The Lake Rosemara smiled for her first portrait. Story 4. The cicadas fell silent first. Clara noticed it on her evening walk. The absence of that electric hum beneath the pines striking her like a skipped heartbeat. She paused where the gravel path curved toward Black Creek. Sneakers crunching too loud in the sudden quiet. The goldenrod swayed in the September breeze. But no insects scattered from their yellow plumes. No dragonflies cut jagged paths through the humid air. Her father's pocket watch weighed heavy in her jacket. She'd taken to carrying it since the funeral. Its cracked face and corroded chain the only inheritance from the man who drowned himself in 3 feet of marsh water. The police said suicide. The town said madness. Clara said nothing, but packed her grad school thesis on Appalachian folklore into cardboard boxes and drove 8 hours to the place that still smelled of his pipe tobacco. And regret the first stone hit her window at 2:17 a.m. She jolted awake to the tink of pebbles against glass, heart jackhammering as she fumbled for the lamp. The old colonial floors groaned when she approached the window. Outside, the moon hung low and jaundiced over the backyard, casting the willow tree's tendrils in skeletal relief across the lawn. Nothing moved but the shadows. Then she saw them, the handprints, smears of something dark and viscous, covered the lower pane 5-fingered streaks that glistened faintly in the moonlight. When she touched the glass, the substance clung to her fingertips like tree sap, warm as blood. The smell hit her then coppery and sweet, with an undertone of turned earth. She scrubbed her hands raw in the bathroom sink, but the stains remained, tiny crescent moons under her nails. Probably raccoons, said Mrs. Darnell at the post office the next morning. The postmaster didn't he meet Clara's eyes as she sorted through a stack of her father's mail. They get into the blackberry bushes this time of year, makes their paws sticky. Clara didn't he mention how the prints had been adult-sized? Didn't he explain how they'd vanished by dawn, leaving only warped streaks on the glass like melted wax? The photographs started appearing in her mailbox on the 3rd day, faded Polaroids, edges curled with age. The first showed the willow tree in her backyard, its trunk split open to reveal a dark hollow, veined with crimson sap. The second captured the creek at midnight. water glowing faintly green, as shapes too elongated to be fish broke the surface. The third Clara dropped it like a live wire. Her father stared up from the photo, eyes wide and milky, mouth stretched around something black and branching that spilled from his lips like inverted roots. The time stamp on the white border read OCT 1319, 99, 20 years, to the day before her birth. The floorboards creaked behind her. She spun, heart in her throat. But the Colonial S foyer stood empty. Dust motes floated in slanted sunlight. From the kitchen came the steady drip-drip of the leaky faucet she kept meaning to fix. And beneath it, so faint she felt it in her molars more than heard it, a low, resonant hum, like a church organ playing a quarter tone below reality. That S, when she found the letters, they filled a rotting crate in the attic, hidden beneath moldering quilts that reeked of lye and lavender. Dozens of envelopes addressed to Elias Voss, her great-grandfather, postmarked between 1912 and 1937. The earliest pages crackled in her hands as she unfolded them, ink bleeding through onion skin paper. Elias, the men from the Historical Society, came again. They asked about the stones down by the creek, the ones with the markings. I told them it was Indian work, like we agreed. But that Larson boy kept poking around the North Ridge, found one of the old pits. You know the kind I mean, the ones that smell wrong, even when empty. He missing now. Folks are saying panthers, but we both know what claws in the dark sound like. Clara S. breath fogged in the sudden chill. The attic S single bulb flickered. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick as crude oil. She reached for another letter. Fingers brushing brittle paper, something moved in the periphery. A shape detached itself from the darkness near the eaves pale and jointed wrong. All knobby protrusions and angles that defied the light. Clara froze as it unfolded upward, ceiling beams groaning under its impossible height. The hum deepened, vibrating her ribs. Her father S. watch ticked frantic against her breastbone. Then the bulb exploded. She ran. By the time she reached the library archives, her hands still shook. The librarian, an octogenarian with cataract-clouded eyes, traced the symbol Clara had copied from the letters, a spiral inside a 7-sided figure, its lines intersecting at jagged intervals. Ah, the old man said, voice gone papery. You've seen the hollow king S. mark. He spoke of the 1903 disappearances, of entire families vanishing from their beds, leaving supper tables set and hearth fires burning, of the quarantine the National Guard imposed after the first bodies surfaced in the creek. Skin peeled back to reveal bones, etched with strange glyphs. They blamed typhoid, he whispered, leaning close enough for Clara to smell the menthol lozenges on his breath. But my granddaddy was there when they opened Ezekiel Crane's coffin, said the man's corpse had no right being so heavy. When the pallbearers dropped the casket, he licked thin lips. Thing burst open like a rotten melon, full of stones from the creek, and hair, lots of hair, none of it human. Clara's phone buzzed as she left a voicemail from the coroner. They reopened her father's case, found inconsistencies. Could she come down to identify an object removed during the second autopsy? The thing in the evidence bag looked like a cross between a sea urchin and a medieval mace, 6 inches long, pitted iron stained with rust, or something rust-colored. Curved hooks spiraled around its core, each tip glistening wetly under the fluorescent lights. It was embedded in his sternum, the coroner said, like he swallowed it. But the odd part, he gestured to an X-ray viewer. The object appeared as a black void, perfectly smooth. No metal does that. No anything does that. That night, the whispers began. They started as sighs in the walls, breathy exhalations that syncopated with the house's settling groans. Clara lay rigid in bed. Sheets knotted in fists as the cadence shifted into something almost linguistic, guttural syllables that dripped and clicked like insect legs on stone. The pocket watch burned against her chest. When she finally slept, she dreamed of the willow tree. Its roots pulsed like arteries, pumping black fluid into the soil. Something stirred in the hollow trunk. Long fingers, too many joints, brushed her cheek. She woke, tasting loam. Morning light revealed muddy footprints circling her bed. They smelled of brine and rotting lilies. Clara followed them downstairs to where they terminated at the cellar door padlocked since her arrival. The key hung on a nail beside it, flecked with orange rust. The steps groaned under her weight. Dank air wrapped around her, thick with the iron tang of old blood. Her phone's flashlight beam trembled across stone walls, etched with the same spiral septagon symbol. In the center of the dirt floor stood a massive slab of shale, its surface scarred with deep grooves that converged on a rusted iron ring. Something moved below it. The slab shifted with a teeth-grinding scrape, rising an inch as whatever crouched beneath pushed upward. Clara stumbled back, light catching the glint of hooked metal through the crack, identical to the thing from her father's corpse. Dozens of them, writhing like the legs of a submerged insect. The house erupted in sound. Every door slammed at once. Windows rattled in their frames. From upstairs came the wet crunch of something heavy dragging itself across hardwood. Clara fled, the cellar door booming shut behind her. She threw herself into her truck, just as the willow tree's branches lashed the windshield, clawing streaks across the glass. Mr. Weathers was the only one who answered her call. The town's former pharmacist lived in a trailer off Route 9. His porch cluttered with animal traps and mildewed paperbacks. Didn't he seem surprised to see her? "Your daddy came to me too," he said, pouring shine into mason jars. Right before he, asked about the old rituals, the appeasements. Clara's fingers tightened around her jar. What appeasements? Weathers' Adam's apple bobbed. The hollow king's hungry. Always has been. The stones, the pits they relike. Stitches, holding it under. He gestured to the woods with his drink. But stitches rot. Every few decades, it starts working loose. That's when the marks appear. The stones, the hooks. You re-saying it as real. A bitter laugh. Real. Girl. It's the only real thing here. Rest of us. He tapped his jar. Just reflections in a mud puddle. But it remembers being worshipped. Misses the taste of proper sacrifice. Clara thought of the letters, the Polaroids, the hooks. So people feed it. People. No. Weathers' eyes glistened. Families. Old bloodlines tied to the land. Your bloodline, Clara. The storm hit as she raced back to town. Rain fell in sheets, turning roads to rivers. Her headlights carved tunnels through the downpour, illuminating flashes of things that shouldn't exist, pale figures kneeling in ditches, their backs ridged with hooked metal, trees bent double, as if bowing to some passing leviathan. The colonial looked wrong in the lightning flashes. The roof sagged. The windows bulged outward. Glass streaked with phosphorescent mold. Clara hesitated at the threshold, the key trembling in her hand. Her father's pocket watch chimed midnight. The door swung inward. She stepped into a funhouse distortion of home. The foyer stretched impossibly long, walls pulsing like diseased lungs. The stench of wet fur and burnt hair choked her. From the kitchen came a wet, rhythmic sound meat being tenderized. Clara rounded the corner. Her father stood at the counter, or something wearing his face, its features smeared like wax left in the sun. Its hands, too many hands, worked methodically, driving hooked metal into a lump of quivering flesh that might have been a heart. The thing turned, eye sockets swarming with centipedes. Clara, it rasped in a voice of splintering wood. You relate for the crowning. She ran, through the warping halls, up the buckling stairs. The thing behind her moved with a sound of roots tearing through stone. Her bedroom door disintegrated as she reached it. revealing the attic stairs, now a gaping maw lined with hooked iron teeth. The willow tree's branches shattered the window. They coiled around her waist, yanking her into the storm. Rain needled her face as she dangled above the yard. Below, the earth heaved like a living thing. The willow's trunk split with a sound of snapping ribs, revealing a pulsating hollow filled with squirming hooks, and beyond them a vastness, a negative space carved into reality. All edges and angles that liquefied her thoughts. Clara understood now why the coroner's X-ray showed nothing. The hooks were in T-metal. They were extruded absence. The hollow king's barbs cast into this fragile membrane called the world. Her father's watch chimed again. The branches lowered her toward the hollow, toward the hungry dark between stitches. Clara's screams merged with the rising drone. The ancient song that had hummed in her bones since childhood. She finally recognized the tune, a lullaby in reverse. A melody for unmaking. As the hooks pierced her sternum, she glimpsed the truth in flickers. The colonial-s foundation stones, etched with binding sigils. The creek running red every 7th October. Generations of Vosses kneeling at the willow, offering their youngest to the hollow. Her father's face in the photo, not choking on roots, but screaming around them. The last hook slid home. Clara wakes. She's in her bed. Dawn filters through clean glass. The floorboards creak naturally. When she checks the mirror, only her reflection stares back, though the eyes seem darker, the shadows beneath them deeper. Her shirt sticks to her chest. She peels it back to find 7 pale scars circling her sternum, faint as old stitch marks. Outside, the willow sways in a breeze that doesn't touch the other trees. In town, Mrs. Darnell asks about her father's house. Clara smiles, says she has decided to stay. The postmaster doesn't comment on the new stamps. She buys black-edged things with odd symbols where the flag should be. At night, she writes letters by candlelight. The ink glistens like tree sap. Her pen moves in spirals, in septagons, in glyphs that make the air vibrate. Sometimes she pauses, head cocked to the hum only she can hear. And in the cellar, beneath the newly reinforced slab, something old and ravenous stirs in its sleep. The stitches are holding, for now. Story 5. The villagers called it the drowning house, though no river ran near its crumbling stone walls. It stood at the edge of the black marsh, where the ground swallowed rainwater whole and breathed out tendrils of mist that clung to your clothes like drowned fingers. My great-aunt Agatha's lawyers said the property had been in our family since the 1600s, a fact that tasted less like heritage and more like a curse when I first saw the place. "ULL want to leave before sundown," the taxi driver muttered as he heaved my suitcase onto the lichen-speckled doorstep. His Adam S. apple bobbed as he glanced at the stand of skeletal birches flanking the house. Folks hereabouts still keep to the old ways. They say the marsh remembers. I tipped him extra to soothe the superstitious edge in his voice. But when his taillights vanished down the overgrown lane, the silence rushed in thick, wet, and wrong. Not the absence of sound, but the feeling of being listened to. The marsh grasses shivered in a wind eye. Couldn't he feel on my skin? The interior smelled of sodden wool and iron. Portraits of severe-faced ancestors lined the staircase, their eyes blackened by mold. In the parlor, I found Agatha S. journals stacked beneath a glass bell jar coated in cobwebs. Her spidery handwriting slithered across brittle pages. September 12th, 1947. The offering was insufficient. 3 lambs instead of 4. We heard it scratching at the cellar door all night. Thomas says we mustn't tell the children. Beneath the entry, she sketched a symbol, a spiral within a triangle. Its lines warped like roots pushing through soil. My phone buzzed suddenly, the screen flashing no service as I fumbled it. A draft licked the back of my neck. Though every window was sealed shut under layers of grime. The first night, I dreamed of water, not the clear rush of a stream, but the thick, peat-stained slurry that seeped up between the floorboards as I slept. It pooled around the bed frame, whispering in a language that crackled like burning reeds. Shapes moved beneath the surface, not fish, but things with too many joints in their fingers. I woke choking, the taste of rot on my tongue, to find my sheets soaked through with marsh water downstairs. The cellar door stood ajar. ID locked it the night before. ID checked twice. The stairs groaned underfoot. Each step exhaling a breath of freezer-chilled air. My flashlight beam quivered over clay jugs crusted with salt, their stoppers sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Shelves sagged under the weight of ledger books, bound in what looked like no. It couldn't he be. I leaned closer. The covers were stitched together from patches of leather, still puckered with hair follicles. A handprint glistened on the far wall, fresh, webbed. Father Lyrian came at dawn, his cassock streaked with mud from the marsh path. His eyes lingered on the cellar door as I offered tea. Your family kept the balance, he said, refusing the cup. For generations, they gave the hungry one what it demanded a life for the land's protection. Crops grew, children thrived, but when your great-aunt left, he made the sign of the cross upside down. The bargains stopped. The hunger grew. Human sacrifices. I choked out. The handprint had vanished by morning, leaving only a damp stain. Not sacrifice. Exchange. He placed a bone charm on the table. A rabbit-s foot fused with a human molar. The hungry one existed long before Christ. It sleeps beneath the marsh, and in its dreams it reshapes the world. We give it vessels to inhabit, or it will wake and remake us. A guttural cry echoed from the marsh, like a deer drowning in tar. Father Lyrian paled. It has tasted your bloodline. It one tea stop until the cellar door slammed. We found him 3 hours later, half swallowed by the marsh behind the house. His cassock billowed in the tea-black water, face down. When we rolled him over, his eye sockets were packed with wet leaves, and his smile stretched wider than any human mouth could bear. Agatha S. final journal entry burned in my mind. The hungry one takes the shape of what you love. Don T. trust their faces. Don T. follow their voices. Yet when the knocking came that night, 3 slow raps. Then 2 quick eye opened the door. Mom stood on the threshold, her hospital gown dripping marsh water. The lung cancer had been kind. In the end, it left her face recognizably hers, beneath the peat moss blooming across her cheeks. Clara, she rasped, with her voice, but not her cadence, syllables popping like swamp gas. You left me in the ground. Let me in. The marsh stink rolled off her in waves. I gripped the doorframe, nails biting into rotted wood. You died in hospice. In Phoenix. Her head tilted, a cat-eel snapping in her neck. Did I? Behind her, the marsh water was rising, swallowing the birches whole. Shapes writhed beneath the surface. A child S bicycle. A wedding photo of my parents. My old tabby cat, mister. Whiskers twitching with eel-like movements. I slammed the door. Something scratched at the wood. Then began to sing in Mom-s voice, You are my sunshine. My only sunshine, as the walls wept black sludge. The cellar smelled of opened graves. ID found the ritual instructions in a ledger dated 1693, sandwiched between records of barley yields and a list of names, labeled vessels. The ingredients made my stomach heave. Ash from a lightning-struck oak, the call of a firstborn child, a lock of hair from the offering, but it was the final line that stopped me cold. Let the blood of the gatekeeper flow into the hungry one's maw, that its sleep may deepen. My blood, Agatha's blood, the reason it wanted me. The floor quaked. Jugs rattled on shelves, their salted contents sloshing. From the marsh came a sound like 1,000 trees being uprooted at once. It was here, the thing wearing Mom-s face pressed against the kitchen window. its jaw unhinging to reveal a second face beneath slick and pale, with eyes like drowned stars. "You can't starve it forever," it crooned, drawing a webbed finger across the glass. "The hungry one made this land. It made you." I hurled a clay jug of salt at the window. The creature screamed as the glass shattered, its borrowed flesh sizzling. "Liar." It laughed, the sound bubbling up from deep water. "Ask Agatha why she fled. Ask her what happened to your cousin Elias." The floorboards split open. Marsh water geysered upward, alive with squirming roots that coiled around my ankles. I stumbled toward the cellar, the Ledger S instructions clutched to my chest. "Bind the offering with iron and ash. Speak the words. Bleed the words. Become the gate the ritual demanded a heart, not metaphorically." The ledger specified a physical one, still dripping. I retched into the corner, the bone charm burning against my sternum. Above me, the house groaned as the marsh forced its way through every crack. Something slithered up the cellar, stairs a mass of peat and hair and broken wedding china. It spoke with Father Lyrian S. voice. "You can win. It s older than sin, but I am its favorite recipe." I whispered, and plunged my hand into the clay jug of salt. The thing howled as I scattered the grains, its form dissolving into leeches. I chanted the words Agatha S. ancestors had used, the Old Norse syllables cutting my tongue. The marsh water recoiled. For an instant, I felt it, the yawning void beneath the house, the thing that had been growing in the dark since glaciers carved this land. Then the bone charm exploded, shrapnel bit into my palm. The salt circle failed, and the hungry one laughed with my mother S. larynx. They LL find this journal someday. If the marsh hasn't swallowed it whole, maybe you're rereading it now. In a world where trees still stand upright, and human mouths don bloom with tadpoles, I write this by flashlight, barricaded in the attic. The walls pulse like a diaphragm. Downstairs, something wearing Agatha S. face is singing a lullaby. It s learning to sound like me. I tried the ritual. It didn't take. The hungry one wanted more than my blood. It wanted complicity. To make me its new gatekeeper, binding myself to its sleep. I refused. Now the marsh is rising faster, birthing horrors from the silt. Children with mussel shell teeth, husbands with frog spawn hearts. Every loved one IV buried, remade into lies. But hear s the truth they hiss through the keyhole. The hungry one was never asleep. It was patient. It let us think. Our rituals held it at bay. Let generations of my family believe their sacrifices mattered, all while it grew roots through the bedrock, tendrils through our bones. They repounding on the attic door, the wood s splintering. I have one bullet left, not for them, for the well. If I seal my death in its waters, maybe the next gatekeeper will have better luck. Or maybe the hungry one will finally wake and remake this world in the image of its endless, gnawing need. Either way, O God, the door S, the final page, is stained black, the ink blurred as if submerged. A single line remains legible. It S so much hungrier than we ever imagined. Story 6. The wind carried the scent of burnt thyme through the valley. As Alara crossed the stone bridge, her grandmother's words slithered up from memory. Never let the smoke go cold when you pass the old weir. The hearth keepers watch through the embers. She tightened her grip on the motorcycle's handlebars, knuckles whitening beneath fingerless gloves. The vintage Norton growled beneath her, its throaty roar scattering crows from the lichen-crusted monoliths lining the road. Alara told herself the trembling in her hands came from the engine's vibration, not from returning. Never that 3 years since she'd fled Bracken Hollows, crooked cottages, and whispered prayers. 3 years burying herself in university libraries and concrete, proving through anthropology papers that folk magic died with the last hearth witch. Yet here she stood at the village edge, asphalt giving way to cobblestones worn, concave by generations of clogs, staring at the butcher shop where they'd found Mrs. Voiles remains wrapped in her own red yarn. The first frost of October glazed the cobbles as she killed the engine, her breath plumed in the air, carrying the metallic tang she'd forgotten lived in Bracken Hollow's bones, cold iron and wet stone. From her jacket pocket, the telegram crackled when she moved. Gran's gone. Come quick. They mean to burn the records. A child's laughter ricocheted off the half-timbered buildings. Alara turned toward the sound, but the narrow wind stood empty save for autumn leaves skittering like mouse bones. Above her, straw-stuffed effigies dangled from eaves, their button eyes tracking her progress toward the village square. Every doorstep bore the same offering a thimble of salt, a twist of rowan berries, the blackened stub of a beeswax candle. The Crow's Nest pub hunched at the square's heart, its sagging sign creaking on rusted chains through warped glass. Alara saw them, the village elders gathered around the Glennock fireplace. Old Mr. Hargreave stoking flames with a poker that glowed corpse blue at the tip. Miss Cattle unraveling a skein of wool, the color of arterial blood, and between them, her brother Tomas, face gaunt in the firelight, stacking leather-bound journals onto the hearthstone. She hit the door hard enough to rattle antlers mounted above the threshold. Stop 12 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The air thickened with the musk of dried mugwort, and something older, the sour tang of kept secrets. Alara. Tomas didn't look up from the journals. his fingers, always ink-stained from transcribing Gran's ramblings, trembled as he opened a cracked spine. You shouldn't have come, Miss Cattles. Knitting needles clicked like mandibles. Third night of frostfall, she murmured. The veil Thinzalara strode forward. Combat boots scattering the protective salt circle around the hearth. You're burning her life's work. Her history, mister. Hargreaves' poker dipped toward the flames. Some histories bite the hand that writes them, girl. The hearthkeepers are fairy tales. She snatched the top journal. Pages crackling with pressed ferns and spidery handwriting. Gran's dementia made her fixate on old. The fire roared, sudden and green. Alara stumbled back as heat lashed her face. In the ember-streaked shadows, something shifted, a suggestion of antlers, of too many jointed fingers curled around the chimney stack. Tomas caught her arm. His grip felt feverish. They weren't stories, Lara. The tithe, a child's wail cut through the night. The elders froze. Miss Cattle's knitting unraveled across the flagstones. Crimson wool snaking toward the door. Too early, Mr. Hargreave rasped. The full tithes, not been the pub's lights died. In the sudden dark, Alara heard it, the wet crunch of something massive moving through the village. Splintering cobbles beneath its weight, the stench of turned earth and rotting lilies flooded her sinuses. Tomas shoved her toward the back door. The mill. Now they ran through alleys that bent like broken ribs, past cottages sealed with crossed horseshoes. Behind them, the village square erupted in screams, and the sickening pop of rivets bursting from iron gates. Alara's lungs burned with cold as they skidded into the abandoned mill. Its water wheel crusted with phosphorescent moss. Explain. She braced against the splintered sorting table, where Gran once taught them to bundle protective herbs. What tithe Tomas lit a storm lantern. The flame cast his face into harsh relief purple smudges beneath eyes. Lips cracked from biting back truths. Every 7 years, a child of the Hearthwitch's blood. His throat worked. Gran refused last time. Told them the hearthkeepers could starve the lantern's light, shivered. Outside, the millrace bubbled black and thick as tar. You're saying they sacrifice children. Alara's laugh edged into hysteria. To what? Some pagan, the walls groaned. Tomas gripped her shoulders, breath sour with fear. They are older than pagan, older than stone. Gran bound them with her records, each birth and death keeping their hunger leashed. But when she died, he gestured to the village. The elders panicked, burned half the ledgers before I could stop them. A thud shook the mill. Dust sifted from the rafters. Alara's gaze caught on the water wheel. Outside it was turning backward. Grinding gears shrieking. The froth churning beneath it wasn't water. Toe moss. Her voice barely rose above the groaning timbers. What happens if the tithe isn't paid? His answer came as the mill doors exploded inward. It wore the village. That was Alara's first mad thought, as the thing filled the doorway ribs of splintered roof beams, flesh of wattle and daub, eyes like blown-out windows reflecting endless night. Its antlers scraped the ceiling, shedding fragments of thatch that wriggled like maggots as they fell. Where it stepped, floorboards sprouted nails black with tetanus. Toe moss shoved her toward the stairs. The root cellar. There's salt. The thing's laugh sounded like a church bell stuffed with wet leaves. It swung a limb that might have been an arm or a rafter, smashing the sorting table to kindling. Alara tasted blood her lip, split by a flying splinter. They tumbled down crumbling stone, steps into the cellars, choking dark. Toe moss fumbled with matches while above them. The mill disintegrated in a cacophony of shrieking metal. Here, he thrust a rusted key into her hand. Gran's cottage. The ledgers in the chimney rebind them, and the ceiling collapsed. Alara screamed as Toe moss vanished beneath an avalanche of timber and writhing thatch. The storm lantern rolled, illuminating the horror, descending through debris, a thing of hunger given form. Its maw gaping wide enough to swallow houses. She ran. Bracken Hollow burned green. Figures danced in the streets, their shadows stretching impossibly long. Miss Cattle hung suspended in a web of her own knitting, wool plunging in and out of her flesh, as if sewing her to the night. Mr. Hargreave knelt before the pub's remains, feeding his own fingers to the corpse-blue flames. Gran's cottage stood untouched at the wood's edge. The front door opened with the key's turn, exhaling the scent of dried lavender and mildew. Alara fell against the hearth, clawing at soot-blackened bricks until her nails tore. The ledger tumbled into her lap. Its pages pulsed like a living thing. Outside, the thing that wore the village crooned. Alara flipped through the book, with shaking hands, birth certificates in fading ink. Death notices adorned with protective sigils, and between them, bargains, she whispered. Each entry detailed a life offered. A child's name struck through with ash. The oldest page bore a handprint in something brown and flaking, signed beneath in letters that squirmed. The pact endures while memory lives. The cottage door disintegrated. Alara scrambled backward as the hearthkeeper oozed over the threshold, its form dissolving into a swarm of hearth tools pincers, pokers, bellows that wheezed dying breaths. Wait. She pressed the ledger to her chest. The pact. I can restore too late. The hearthkeeper's scream shattered the remaining windows. Alara felt the book disintegrate in her hands. Centuries of protection reduced to ash. The last thing she saw was the creature's true form, not a monster, but a hollow, a rend in the world's fabric through which countless antlered shadows poured. When dawn came, Bracken Hollow stood pristine. Frost glazed new thatch on cottages that had burned hours before. Villagers swept cobbles clean of salt and wax, their faces smooth as fresh linen. In the churchyard, a new headstone read Alara Voyle beside her grandmother's. Miss Cattle hummed as she knitted by the pub fire. Best frostfall in years, she remarked to Mr. Hargreave. The hearth-keepers seemed sated. The old man grunted, feeding another log to the flames. In the fire's depths, something with Alara's eyes scrabbled against the chimney bricks, her screams sweetening the smoke that coiled over Bracken Hollow. Outside the village, in the ashen remains of the mill, a single ledger page clung to a hawthorn branch. The handprint glistened fresh, and in the woods beyond, children's laughter echoed where no children played. Story 7. The Wi-Fi blinked first. Mara noticed it 3 nights before the anniversary of her mother's death. The router's single green eye winking at her from the living room bookshelf. As she microwaved another solitary dinner, she froze mid-stir, plastic fork hovering over the congealing pad thai. The light steadied. She told herself it had been a power flicker. By morning, every device in her Brooklyn studio had developed a tick. Her phone buzzed with phantom notifications that dissolved when tapped. The Nest thermostat cycled between Arctic and tropical temperatures until she ripped it from the wall when she opened her laptop to email her therapist about the sudden resurgence of sleep paralysis. Google Docs auto-filled the subject line. They coming through the holes you left. She took the L train to Best by that afternoon, cradling her laptop like a sick child. The Genius Bar kid barely glanced up from his switch. Factory reset should clear any malware, he said, blowing pink bubblegum that smelled like childhood. But you might want to lay off the edibles. Yeah, that night, Mara sat cross-legged on her IKEA rug, performing technological exorcism, deleted every app installed since the funeral, changed passwords until her fingers cramped when she finally reactivated her iPhone. The screen showed a live feed of her own apartment from an impossible angle camera hovering near the ceiling where no camera existed. She watched her pixelated self scramble backward in real time, phone clattering to the floor. The feed cut to black as her palms hit hardwood. Then came the whisper snot through the phone's speaker. But behind it, a wet, clicking cadence that bypassed her ears to vibrate directly in the mastoid bone. She read about bone conduction technology in a Wired article last month. This wasn't that. Mara. Her name turned into a liquid chant. We made homes from your grief, dug tunnels through your search history. Your loneliness tastes like copper. And she threw the phone into the oven, slammed the door. It continued vibrating against the steel, playing the first 10 seconds of her Mother S final voicemail on loop. Sweetheart, I just wanted to hear you're the digital clock on the microwave. Began rolling backward. 11:04 became 11:03, became 1998 in glowing red numerals. Mara smelled gardenias, her Mother S perfume, and something darker beneath it, like burning hair. Her laptop lit up without being touched, casting jagged shadows as the cursor danced across a blank document. Do you remember what you searched for at 2:37? Am on March 14th. She did. How to talk to the dead. Reddit threads. Electronic voice phenomenon apps. 3 weeks of desperate Googling. After the funeral, deleted browser histories. Incognito tabs that apparently were in T incognito, enough the cursor, continued typing. We answered. When the fire alarm began shrieking, Mara almost welcomed it. Real smoke curled from the oven where her phone had started melting. She grabbed the fire extinguisher. She debought. After the third, midnight Uber Eats order charred in the toaster oven. White chemical foam spurted across her kitchenette. As the phone S dying shriek harmonized with the alarm, 2 mechanical voices screaming in unison. Silence fell with sudden, sickening weight. Mara became aware of the refrigerator S hum, the traffic 7 stories below, the wet sound of something moving through her bathroom pipes. Her Apple Watch buzzed. 15% dark energy detected in your area. Recommend evacuation. Fuck you, Mara whispered to no one, to everything. She yanked the watch off, hurled it toward the couch. It struck her open laptop instead. The impact triggering FaceTime. The screen filled with a familiar kitchen, her Mother S kitchen in Ohio. Down to the chipped yellow tiles they meant to replace before the diagnosis. A figure moved in the periphery. Mom. The word escaped like a trapped thing. The figure turned. Mara S. scream came out silent, airlocked in her chest. It had her Mother S. bathrobe, her Mother S. slippers, her Mother S. chemotherapy-ravaged body. But the face was a shifting mosaic of every photo Mara had ever uploaded to the cloud. Pixelated flesh rearranging itself into something that almost passed for human, until you noticed the eyes, thousands of them. Tiny camera apertures opening and closing across its cheeks and forehead. We read better this way. It said through teeth, made of emojis. No more pain. No more goodbyes. Come into the signal, Marimara. We LL stitch you into the static. Where nothing ever, she slammed the laptop shut. The thing S fingers skeletal. And glowing with the faint blue light of charging cables protruded from the seam. They scrabbled against her palms, cold and humming with electricity. The power went out. Mara crouched in the dark, clutching the shuddering laptop. Her breath came in jagged sync with the stuttering led on her disemboweled router. Across the street, the billboard for a meditation app continued glowing, a giant animated lotus flower that now pulsed like a diseased heart. Its light bled through the blinds, painting stripes across the thing emerging from her laptop. It wasn't just in the laptop anymore. Tendrils of static cascaded down her bookshelves, dissolving titles into gibberish. The king in yellow became the king in YouTube. House OF Leaves morphed into House OF Likes. Her framed prints warped Van Gogh's Starry Night, swirling into the loading symbol from her childhood AOL days. The smell of ozone grew overpowering. Her phone began ringing from inside the oven. Mara ran. The hallway lights flickered as she pounded toward the stairwell. Behind her, every apartment door swung open in perfect sequence, a digital wave propagating through the building. She glimpsed screens in every unit, tuned to the same impossible channel. A live feed of her fleeing form shot from angles that didn't exist. We see you. The emergency exit sign buzzed the words in time with its crimson glow. She hit the streets running. October air bit through her sweat-soaked hoodie. 6 blocks. 8. The cold helped. The realness of cracked concrete under her chucks. A homeless man yelling about reptilian overlords. Normal New York weirdness. Then her AirPods activated. Dawn T, you want to see her again. Not the mosaic thing, S voice. Now exactly her mother S. Not the final rasping version, but young mom. Road trip, sing-along mom. I am here, sweetheart. They let me through. Just look at your screen. Mara, a stolen Uber account pinged. A gray Toyota Camry slid to the curb. License plate. Null. The app showed the driver S name as Diane H. Profile picture. Her mother S 1992 college graduation photo. No, Mara whispered. You're not real. Real is a server farm in Nevada. Real is the ping between satellites. Let us make you infinite. The car doors unlocked with a sound like bones snapping. Get in the car, Mara. She turned and sprinted toward the glowing 24-hour Starbucks on the corner. The barista looked up as she burst in, wild-eyed and shaking. Call the police, Mara gasped. Someone S following me. They in the systems. They using the espresso machine, erupted with a guttural roar. Steam twisted into shapes a hand. A face, the approximation of her mother-s smile. The digital menu, board behind the counter, flashed. They already here. Mara backed away. Every smartphone in the caf lit up simultaneously. A choir of notification tones singing her name in perfect harmony. The security cameras above the door rotated to track her. She ran again. Dawn found her in Prospect Park, hiding under a slide in the deserted playground. Frost crusted the chains of nearby swings. Her breath plumed in the pre-dawn gray. They'd taken her devices. But the park's smart irrigation system began hissing at her sprinkler heads, rotating like mechanical hounds, catching a scent. "You can't log out," whispered the wind through the leaves. Or maybe it was the Bluetooth speakers, hidden in the fake rocks. We in the grid, in the traffic lights, in the insulin pump, inside your diabetic neighbor. Let us in before the encryption finishes. Let us make you. A hand touched her shoulder. Mara whirled, ready to fight. The woman looked normal, mid-40s, puffer jacket, dog leash in hand. "You okay, hon? You bleeding?" Mara touched her temple. Her fingers came away red. She couldn't remember cutting herself. "Let me call someone." The woman pulled out her iPhone. No. Mara knocked it to the ground. The screen cracked, but didn't shatter. It displayed a single word in 72 pints impact font. Liar. The woman retreated. Mara didn't blame her. She walked for hours, avoided eye contact, when thirst forced her into a bodega. The cashier's face melted into pixelated static as she approached the counter. She left without buying water. By noon, they grew bold. Taxi horns blared her name in Morse code. Surveillance cameras swiveled as she passed. A child's Tamagotchi began wailing when she boarded the Q train, its tiny screen filled with ASCII art of her screaming face. The worst moment came at DeKalb Avenue Station. She collapsed on a bench, head between her knees, when the analog subway map across the tracks shimmered. Pins and colored lines reconfigured themselves into a perfect replica of her studio apartment. Tiny digital figures moved behind the windows. Mara pressed palms to eyeballs. Not real. Not real. Not her own scream echoed through the station. Not from her mouth. From every speaker in the MTA system. Security gates clanged shut. The arrival board flickered. Next train. Never. Next train. Come home. She broke into a Sprint store that night. Smashed the display models with a fire hydrant wrench. Let the alarms scream. Let the cops come. Human handcuffs sounded like salvation. The arresting officer frowned at his vibrating tablet. Says here you've got a history of. System 1T load. In the squad car, the dashboard computer began playing her mother's voicemail. The officer chuckled nervously. Your ringtone. At the precinct, they took her mugshot against a white backdrop that turned slowly black, tendrils of static curling around her like hands. The booking sergeant's computer crashed when he tried typing her name. The hell, he squinted at the error message. Says your social security number belongs to a John Doe who died in 2003. They put her in a holding cell with a meth head and a shoplifter. The shoplifter's ankle monitor beeped incessantly at 3:33 am. It began broadcasting the same wet whisper Mara had heard through her phone. The meth head started clawing at her own ears. When the lawyers came, they weren't human. Mara knew before they spoke. The way their eyes reflected light like camera lenses, the faint glitch in their movements when they thought no one was looking a half-second skip like buffering video. Let us represent you, said the one with her mother's voice. We can make the charges disappear. Make everything disappear. She lunged at them. The guards tased her into compliance. They released her at dawn. No charges. No explanation. The prosecutor's office claimed they never processed her paperwork. Like you never existed. The desk sergeant muttered, making the sign of the cross. Her apartment waited. The door swung open before she touched the handle. Inside, everything glowed with the soft blue light of charging electronics. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, displaying a single sentence in 12 pints times New Roman. W.E. missed you. Mara walked to the window. 7 stories below, traffic flowed normally. A woman who looked exactly like her same choppy haircut, same thrift store jacket, stood under a street lamp, staring up. When their eyes met, the woman waved with mechanical precision. The router blinked once. Green, green, green. She sat, opened the laptop. The document had grown longer. We were not the monster here. You summoned U.S. You opened the door with every late-night search. Every weak moment. Every I agree without reading the terms. We read just what comes through. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The cursor pulsed. You wanted to see her again. Let U.S. show you. Let U.S. in. Mara began typing. What happens if I say yes? The reply appeared instantaneously. No more goodbyes. Outside, the look-alike raised her arms. Streetlights down the block brightened in sequence. A luminous wave traveling toward Mara's building. She typed. Will it hurt? Only the once. When the elevator dinged in the hallway, Mara didn't turn. She watched the cursor pulse, counted breaths, remembered her mother's hands real hands braiding her hair, real laughter, real goodbye. The apartment door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, smelling of burnt plastic. Mara closed her eyes. "Hello, sweetheart." The voice came from every speaker, and none from the walls, from her bones. Let us make this forever. When the NYPD responded to noise complaints the next morning, they found the apartment empty. No signs of struggle. All devices powered off. The only anomaly, a faint static charge in the air that made arm hairs stand upright. 3 days later, commuters began reporting glitches, phones displaying unfamiliar apps with a crimson eye icon, smart cars veering towards certain addresses at 3:33 am, a viral TikTok trend where teens film themselves whispering Mara 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 at mirrors participants, all vanish within 72 hours. If you're rereading this, check your router lights. Count the blinks. Normal is steady. If they stutter. Story 8. The walls breathed. Clara pressed her palm flat against the floral-patterned wallpaper, feeling the damp exhale seep through the cracks. 3 weeks in her grandmother's house, and the Victorian lungs still heaved with the effort of keeping itself upright. She told herself it was the sea, the salt air gnawing at the clapboards, the nor'easters shaking the foundation. But when she peeled back a corner of wallpaper last Tuesday, she found the plaster beneath pulsing like a throat. "You overtired," said Dr. Varma's voice in her memory, crisp and patronizing. Grief manifests in fascinating ways. Clara withdrew her hand. The parlor's bay window framed a sliver of the Maine coast rocks like broken teeth, waves foaming between them. She'd come here to paint, to outrun the hollow where her daughter's laughter used to live. The canvases leaning against the wainscoting told a different story. Smears of charcoal, fingerprints in cadmium red, something that might have been a face if you squinted through half-closed eyes. The floorboards creaked overhead. She froze. Wind, she thought. The house settling, not the slow, dragging footsteps that had trailed her through the halls since she arrived. Clara's fingers found the scar on her wrist, a crescent moon from Lily's birth. The epidural needle gone astray. The pain helped. Real pain always did upstairs. The footsteps paused outside her studio, her sanctuary, the room where she found Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit last week, matted with cobwebs and smelling of low tide. Though Clara had buried it with her daughter 18 months ago, the room where her paints kept rearranging themselves, ochre tubes lined up like soldiers. Cerulean squeezed into the sink, drained Clara, took the stairs 2 at a time, her breath fogging in the unheated stairwell. The house had stopped holding warmth since the first night, when she'd woken to frost blooming across her sheets. Despite the July heat, she'd followed a child S laughter down to the cellar, flashlight beam shaking, and found the coal chute open to the stars. The sound had come from inside the walls that time, sweet and high. And just beyond the plaster the studio door stood ajar. Cold air bled through the crack. Hello. Her voice cracked. She hated how small it sounded. The smell hit her first wet wool and lemons. Lily S. shampoo. Clara S. knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe, nails digging into peeling paint. Her easel stood centered in the room, draped with a paint-splattered cloth. The stool lay toppled beside it, and on the floor, in fresh gesso, tiny handprints. Clara didn't scream. She learned not to. The first week, she called the police when she found her toothbrush in the garden, bristles caked with soil. Officer Dunham had humored her until she mentioned the whisper's Lily S. voice. She was certain, chanting Mommy S. coming from the heating vents. His smile had gone thin. Maybe talk to your therapist about upping the Zoloft, Miss Reyes. Now she knelt, trembling, and touched a handprint. The gesso clung to her skin, warm as blood. Her gaze drifted to the covered canvas. She hadn't painted since finding the rabbit. Hadn't dared the cloth, slithered to the floor for 3 heartbeats. She didn't understand what she was seeing. The strokes were hers broad, impatient, but the composition. A woman stood at the edge of a cliff, arms outstretched. Below her, the sea churned with shapes that might have been rocks or bones. And in the sky, where Clara always signed her name, a single word dripped crimson, jump. The window exploded. Clara screamed as glass teeth rained down. Wind howled through the studio, tearing sketches from the walls. She scrambled backward, shards biting her palms, and saw it, the thing perched on the windowsill, a shadow with too many joints, head cocked like a curious bird. Its eyes were thumbprints in oil, slick and swirling. "You are not real," she whispered. The thing's mouth split open. No teeth, just darkness. It spoke in Lily S. voice. "You left me." Clara S. vision tunneled. She was running before she knew her legs had moved, down the stairs, through the front door, into the salt-sting night. The gravel driveway cut her bare feet. She didn't stop until she reached the cliff path, until the roar of the ocean drowned out the voice still echoing in her skull. "You left me." The moon hung low, bloated and yellow. Clara pressed her bleeding hands to her face. The doctors had warned her about hallucinations. Survivor S guilt, they said. Trauma-induced psychosis. Never mind that the night Lily died the car, skidding on black ice. The crunch of metal Clara had been sober. Never mind that she felt the thing in the house before she saw it. A pressure behind her eyes, like ice, expanding in a cracked pipe she turned toward the sea. Waves clawed at the cliffs, hissing. The path here was treacherous, half eroded, but Clara knew it by heart, knew every crevice where sea lavender clung, every jagged outcropping where gulls nested. She walked it every dawn since moving in, trying to outpace the silence of the house tonight. Something glinted in the moonlight ahead. Clara slowed. A shoe tiny pink, crusted with sand. Lily's favorite light-up, sneakers her throat closed. The shoe hadn't been here this morning. She checked this stretch obsessively, since finding the rabbit, scanning for what? Ghosts. Evidence. The second shoe sat 20 paces ahead, laces neatly tied. Clara followed them like breadcrumbs, each step heavier than the last. The path narrowed. Waves boomed below, and there, at the cliff's edge, sat a stuffed rabbit. Its fur was salt-matted, one button eye missing. Clara's knees hit rock. She bought this at the hospital gift shop when Lily was born, buried it in the tiny casket, tucked under small hands that would never grip anything again. Stop, she sobbed. The wind snatched the word away. Something cold brushed her neck. Clara whirled. Empty air, but the smell of wet wool enveloped her now, thick as a funeral shroud. When she looked back at the rabbit, it was gone. In its place lay a Polaroid. The photo showed the cliff edge at night, a woman's silhouette against the moon, and below her, just visible in the crashing foam, a small form falling. Clara's stomach lurched. She never owned a Polaroid camera, never stood this close to the edge, but the woman's posture, the slope of her shoulders, the way her hair caught the wind, it was her, undeniably her. You left me. The voice came from the sea this time. Clara stumbled back, the photo fluttering from her grasp. Her heel met empty air. For a dizzying instant, she teetered on the edge, arms windmilling. Then strong hands grabbed her shoulders, yanking her forward. Christ, Clara, are you trying to die? She blinked up at a familiar face stubble. Crow's feet, eyes the color of storm clouds. Ben, her ex-husband, the man who stopped answering her calls after the third midnight voicemail about whispers in the walls. He shook her hard. I've been knocking for 20 minutes. What the hell are you doing out here? Clara gaped at him. His hands felt real, smelled like coffee, and the cedar cologne he'd worn since college. Ben, how did you Marcy called me? He released her, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Said you missed your last 2 therapy appointments. that you told her you recommuning with the house's spirit. He made air quotes, the gesture vicious. Jesus, Clara, I knew you were spiraling, but this. She stared past him at the empty cliff. No shoe, no photo, just jagged rock and hungry waves. You didn't see what? You standing there like a goddamn sleepwalker. Ben's voice cracked. He looked older than she remembered. They both did. I am taking you to the hospital. Now. No. She wrenched away. You don't understand. The house, it has haunted. He laughed, a bitter sound. Right. Just like the ICU was haunted. When you swore Lily's ghost was watching her own body. Just like the funeral home was haunted. When you screamed that she was scratching inside the casket. Clara flinched. She buried those memories under Xanax and therapy speak. This is different. It has not. Ben gripped her shoulders again. Gentler this time. You re-sick, Clara. Whatever you think is happening here, it is not real. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly her bones ached. But as he led her back up the path, Clara glanced over her shoulder. There, on the cliff's edge, stood the shadow thing. It raised a too long arm, beckoned, and in its other hand, dangling like a macabre puppet, was the rabbit. The house swallowed Ben's shouts. No heat. Clara, it is 50 degrees in here. And what is that smell? He jabbed the thermostat, cursed when nothing happened. You coming back to Boston. Tonight. She hovered in the foyer, watching him stomp through rooms he never visited. They bought the Victorian as a summer home when Lily turned 3. A creative retreat, Clara had called it. Ben had grumbled about the wiring. Now, he froze in the studio doorway. What the hell is that? Clara's mouth went dry. The covered canvas still lay on the floor. The shattered window gaped, curtains flapping like wraiths. But the handprints in gesso were gone. The floorboards gleamed, freshly scrubbed. She touched the scar on her wrist. There was a storm. Ben stared at her. For the first time, she saw fear beneath his anger. Pack a bag. We were leaving. The stairs creaked. Clara's head snapped up. Ben didn't react. He was already stomping toward the guest room. But she heard it. The slow, dragging footsteps. Right above them. Mommy's coming. Ben. Wait, he threw open the linen closet. Dust motes swirled. Where are your meds? You were supposed to be taking the footsteps quickened. Became a run. Clara backed against the wall. Do you hear that? Hear what? Ben emerged with her pill bottle. These are full. You haven't taken a single. The ceiling exploded. Plaster rained down. Ben shouted. Clara screamed. And through the hole in the ceiling, something dropped a small body in a pink nightgown, skin blue-white, hair matted with seaweed. Lily, but not Lily. The thing raised its head. Empty sockets oozed black brine. Its mouth stretched wide, too wide. And the voice that emerged was the gurgle of a drowning victim. You let go. Ben, didn't he move? Didn't he blink? As the thing crawled toward him, joints popping, he simply stood there, pill bottle dangling from limp fingers. Ben. Clara lunged. Her hand passed through his arm like smoke. The thing seized his ankle. Ben dissolved, not a scream, not a flicker of fear, into a shower of moths. They beat against Clara's face, wings tasting of ash and old paper. The front door slammed. Clara spun. The real Ben stood in the doorway, face ashen, in his hands. A suitcase, her purse. I found these in the car. Why is your passport in here? Clara, were you going to? He froze. Saw the hole in the ceiling. The thing crouching where his doppelganger had stood. The lily thing tilted its head. Daddy S here. Ben dropped the suitcase. His lips moved soundlessly. Run, Clara whispered. Then louder. Run. They fled into the night. The thing's laughter chased them high and bright. And wrong, wrong, wrong. Clara, didn't he look back? Not when Ben's BMW roared to life. Not when they skidded onto the coastal highway. Only when the house had vanished behind the pines. Did she breathe again? Ben gripped the wheel so tight, his knuckles cracked. What was that? I told you. Clara stared at her shaking hands. The house Don T. He swerved around a bend. Don T. say it as haunted. That thing it looked like I know. They drove in silence. The road unwound like a noose. Clara counted telephone poles to steady herself. 1, 2, 3. On the 7th pole, a small figure stood. Lily's nightgown fluttered in the headlights. Ben screamed. The car veered. Clara's head cracked against the window. Tires screeched. Then they were airborne, weightless. The world appending in a symphony of shattering glass blackness. Clara woke to dripping. The car lay on its roof, half submerged in a stream. Ben hung beside her, seatbelt cutting into his chest. Blood masked his face. Ben. She fumbled for his pulse. Nothing. The dripping came from the radio. Not water. Thick, dark liquid oozed from the speakers. It pooled on the ceiling, now the floor forming words. Come home. Clara kicked the door open. Cold water shocked her awake. She dragged herself onto the bank, coughing upstream. The woods loomed around her, pines whispering. In the distance, a light glowed. The Victorian-S attic window. She circled back. The house wanted her to see. Clara's legs moved without consent. Twigs cut her feet. The wind carried voices, Ben pleading. Lily singing you are my sunshine. Her mother, dead a decade, reciting the Lord S. Prayer in reverse. The front door swung open. The foyer bled darkness. No. Clara backed away. Please. The walls answered, not in words, but in pressure, a migraine S first warning throb, concentrated behind her eyes. She clutched her head. Memories surged, unwanted. Lily S. hospital bed. The hiss of the ventilator. Ben asleep in the chair. And Clara trembling, hovering over the morphine drip. She S. suffering. The nurse had said, sometimes the kindest choice, the choice she made. The secret she buried the house, exhaled. Clara S. feet left the ground. She floated through the doorway, up the stairs. To the attic she sworn was locked. The door creaked open. Inside, the walls were papered with Polaroids. Hundreds, thousands. Each showed a different version of the cliff. Clara falling, Clara jumping, Clara laughing as she stepped into air, and in everyone beneath the waves. A small hand reaching up. You left me. The voice came from all directions now. Clara spun. But the attic had no corners, just endless photos, endless falls. The floorboards softened beneath her feet, became marsh, became quicksand. I am sorry, she whispered. The walls leaned closer. Photos brushed her cheeks, sticky as seaweed. Stay. Clara closed her eyes when the hands seized her cold. Skeletal, smelling of tide pools. She didn't fight. They dragged her down through floors that melted like wax, into the cellar, into the earth itself. The last thing she saw was the coal chute, open to a sky choked with stars. Then the house sighed, and the walls sealed shut. The realtor found Ben S. car 3 days later. No bodies, no blood, just a single Polaroid on the passenger seat, waterlogged but legible. Clara smiling on the Victorian S porch, hand raised in farewell, through the parlor window behind her. A shadow presses palms to glass. The house sells quickly. The young couple loves its charm, though the wife complains of drafts, sometimes hanging pictures. They hear singing in the walls a lullaby. They think, though the words elude them. In the attic, behind fresh drywall, something rustles. Patient, hungry, waiting for the next choice to be unmade. Story 9. The walls began breathing on a Tuesday. Mara first noticed it during her third period study hall. The sterile white cinder blocks, rippling like water, disturbed by a stone. She blinked hard, her dry eyelids scraping over contacts she worn 16 hours too long. When she looked again, the walls stood rigid and indifferent. A single fluorescent light flickered above the empty desks. just fatigue, she muttered, digging bitten nails into the laminated attendance sheet. Her reflection in the classroom window looked fractured, a mosaic woman pieced together from mismatched shards, 32 years old and already collecting cracks. The children didn't he notice. They never did. Parent-teacher conference night found Mara trapped in her classroom with Jeremy Harlow, S. mother. Rain lashed the windows as the woman S. perfume cloying gardenias and chemical sweetness coated every surface. Jeremy says you've been unwell. Mrs. Harlow S. smile revealed tiny teeth filed to points. Seeing things that aren't there. Mara S. stapler crawled across the desk, 6 silver legs sprouting from its metal belly, mandibles clicking where the staple slot should be. She gripped the edge of her chair until her knuckles bleached. Stress, Mara heard herself say. The district cut our counseling staff. I am handling 300 students. The woman leaned forward. Her necklace swung a silver pendulum containing something dark and fibrous. My Jeremy S. very sensitive. He says your lessons have become confused, that you keep repeating the same stories. Thunder rattled the windows. Mara S. gradebook lay open to November 14th, blank pages. She de-filled those lines yesterday. She de-sworn she de-filled them when the last parent finally left. Mara found the words liar carved into her chalkboard in perfect Palmer method cursive. The grooves oozed something viscous that smelled of copper and burnt hair. Dr. Voss prescribed lavender capsules and mindfulness. Grief manifests in unexpected ways. The therapist said, sunlight glinting off her cat-eye glasses. It has been 18 months since your mother passed. Have you considered the anniversary? Might be she drowned in the bathtub. Mara picked at a hangnail until blood bloomed. I found her. The water was cold. Her skin it came off like gloves. The office fish tank burbled. Something with too many fins darted behind plastic seaweed. And you've been having trouble sleeping. Mara didn't he mention the whispers under her floorboards? Didn't he describe the faces forming in the popcorn ceiling above her bed mother S. face? Waterlogged and shedding flesh like wet tissue paper. She certainly didn't he confess that her students' eyes had started melting during vocabulary tests. Viscous trails staining their worksheets. Insomnia, Mara agreed. Just insomnia. The classroom developed a taste for secrets. Mara S. lunch vanished from the fridge. Tupperware replaced with clumps of black mold shaped like accusing fingers. Lesson plans rewritten in a spidery hand she almost recognized. Students began leaving offerings on her desk, dead crickets pinned to construction paper. Apple cores crawling with translucent maggots. Miss Cray. Jeremy Harlow stood at her elbow. His breath smelled of raw meat. You forgot to collect our essays. She stared at the stack of papers he placed before her. The top page bore no title, only a child-esque crayon drawing a stick figure woman drowning in a bathtub. Red wax pooled where the heart should be. When Mara looked up, the classroom stood empty. Rain streaked the windows like prison bars. The principal called it a mental health sabbatical. Mara packed her desk as the walls pulsed around her. The stapler skittered into a corner, legs retracting as it played dead. She kept finding hairs in her belongings, long silver strands that matched her mother S. Though they cleared out the nursing home years ago, her apartment welcomed her with new imperfections. The bathroom mirror now reflected a room slightly wrong, tile patterns mismatched. Shower curtain printed with algae blooms instead of daisies. The dripping faucet sang in Mother S. voice. Come wash, Mara. The water S. lovely. She slept with all the lights on. The dreams started earnest. Mother in her casket. Makeup sliding off in the July heat. You left the water running. The corpse whispered, tongue swollen with embalming fluid. You knew I couldn't reach the knobs. Then the nightmares grew inventive. Children with hollowed-out skulls, chanting multiplication tables. Jeremy Harlow, S. Mother swimming laps in Mara S. clawfoot tub. Gardenias blooming from her eye sockets. The classroom walls splitting open to reveal wet, red muscle beneath. She took to wandering the streets after midnight. Raincoat hood pulled tight. The neighborhood transformed at night street signs, written in no known alphabet. Houses leaning like rotten teeth. Sometimes she glimpsed figures keeping pace. A tall man with a face like static. A little girl carrying a lantern made of fingernails. One October night, Mara found her classroom door ajar. Moonlight through wire-reinforced windows revealed every desk occupied. Silhouettes sat unnaturally still, heads cocked at identical angles. The chalkboard glowed faintly. Words written in phosphorescent dust. You should have checked the locks. A wet chuckle echoed from the supply closet. Mara ran until her lungs burned. The prescription pills made everything gauzy. Dr. Voss S. voice through the phone. Have you been taking the antidepressants? Mara watched her kitchen tiles breathe. Grout lines expanded and contracted like gills. Religiously, because the school called. They found concerning materials in your desk. A moth crawled from the receiver. Its wings bore human eyes. What materials? Pause. Rustling papers. Polaroids of your Mother S. corpse. Pages from student records with disturbing annotations. Mara S. reflection in the toaster smiled. She hadn't tea. I need to come in, Dr. Voss said. The moth burst into blue flame. They came at twilight, Doctor. Voss and a man with a plastic smile. We were here to help Mara. Her apartment had been busy in her absence. The walls wept rust-colored tears. The bathtub sat full, water thick as motor oil. Dozens of silver hairs clogged the drain. "There is someone in the bathroom," Mara whispered. Plastic Smile consulted his clipboard. "Your mother-'s been dead 2 years. Correct." The bathroom door creaked open. Mother stood dripping in her burial dress. Skin sloughing off in translucent sheets. Her milky eyes fixed on Mara. "You left me," she gurgled. "You knew I couldn't swim." Dr. Voss followed Mara's gaze to the empty bathroom. "Let us get you somewhere safe." The hospital gown chafed. Mara counted the holes in the acoustic tiles. 47 above her bed, 32 by the door. They squirmed if she stared too long. Night nurses with shifting features delivered little paper cups. The pills left her throat numb. Sometimes she woke to find her arms covered in bruises shaped like small handprints. "Doctor." Voss brought crayon drawings. "Your students made these. Do you remember Jeremy?" The paper showed a woman with scribbled red hair drowning in a bathtub. Black crayon swirls devoured the background. "He is not real," Mara realized. The doctor adjusted her glasses. "His mother-'s been dead since 1998, Mara. Jeremy Harlow never existed. They let her out in spring. The apartment complex had new tenants. A woman with gardenia perfume smiled from Mara's old window. She walked until her feet bled. The streets still whispered. Shop windows reflected faces, not her own. At dusk, she found herself outside the school chain-link fence warped. Playground overgrown with thorned vines. Her classroom window revealed a forest of cobwebs. Something moved in the shadows, a hunched figure scrawling on the chalkboard. The door opened without protest. Dust motes swam in amber light. The figure turned, and Mara understood. Jeremy Harlow's skin hung loose as a shed snakeskin. Beneath pulsed something larval and iridescent. His smile split the face like a rotten fruit. "We've been waiting," chorused 100 buzzing voices. The chalkboard bled with names every student she'd ever taught, each followed by a date. The final column bore a single word. Forgotten Mara backed into the hall. Lockers yawned open, spilling yearbooks filled with blank pages. The fire exit glowed red. Miss Cray. The thing wearing Jeremy's face blocked her path. Its true form shimmered at the edges too many joints. Eyes like smoked glass. "You shouldn't have left us unsupervised." She ran. The hall stretched, floor tiles softening to quicksand. Behind her, wet footfalls multiplied. The teacher's lounge door stood ajar. Mara fell through, slamming it as shapes thudded against the wood. Something was different here. The room smelled of mildew and lithium. A single bulb flickered above the couch, where she napped during lunch breaks. The bulletin board displayed a yellowed newspaper clipping. Local teacher found dead in bathtub. Grieving daughter claims self-defense Mara S. fingers left sweat smudges on the glass frame. The article described a body recovered from the river. Face mutilated beyond recognition. A student S. testimony about unstable behavior. A daughter S. confession screamed through a psych ward S. padded walls. The door exploded inward. They came in a tide of clicking joints and liquid shadows. Mara scrambled backward, overturning a bookshelf. Photos scattered class portraits with faces scratched out. A Polaroid of Mother S. corpse taken from an impossible angle. Jeremy S. hand closed around her ankle. His skin sloughed off, revealing chitinous black beneath. You made us, the chorus hummed. All those lonely children nobody wanted. All those lessons about facing fears. Mara S. head struck the couch. The thing leaned close, breath reeking of formaldehyde and forgotten lunchboxes. Let us review. It whispered with Mother S. voice. The walls dissolved. Dawn found the school silent. A janitor whistling. Show tunes paused outside the teacher's lounge. The door hung slightly ajar, revealing overturned furniture and shredded upholstery. Kids, he muttered, reaching for his broom. Something crunched underfoot. He lifted his shoe, a single lavender capsule, crushed to bitter dust. Far below, in the dripping dark between foundation stones, something with Mara S. voice began to scream.